Hello, hello. It is time to talk relationships. I just have to bring Donnie on here. Let me figure out what I'm doing. Okay, it says it's adding him. Hey, Mario.
Hey, Sheryl.
There you are. Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you tonight?
I'm doing all right. I was hoping that I'd be able to use my laptop, but alas, I'm not. So that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the technology is still trying to catch up with what we're trying to do with it, right?
I think so too. I think so too.
But at least we get to hang out together. So thank you to those who are joining us. I recently met Donnie through a mutual mentor and coach, Oge Okosieme. So Oge, if you catch this later, thank you so much for introducing us. We're having a lot of fun together.
We are.
So check out my podcast, Exploring Possibilities. I interviewed Donnie, what has it been, 3 weeks now?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be 3 weeks tomorrow.
And we've had some fabulous conversations since that podcast, and I'm like, we can't keep these to ourselves. We need to get out there and stir the pot. So here we are.
Get ready. Oh man.
And it seems like whatever we talk about, it keeps coming back to relationships.
It does. And that's what everything's about. And I think we're at a time now where people want them. They want them to be real and authentic and kind of messy, but they also want them to be fulfilling. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and many of us are like going through layers of figuring out who we are and getting real with ourselves. Because for a long time, I just kind of played with the American dream and got lost in the whole business world and all of that. And now it's kind
Yeah.
of the last few years I've really been diving into who am I and what is it I want, and that really we play that all out in our relationships. And so it's kind of interesting when I'm walking around still figuring out who I am, and I'm bringing somebody else with me through that journey, right? And he's doing the same thing. And Mario, you're watching, so you can chime on in too.
Hey, Echo. I'm glad you could join us. Hey, Mario.
So
Oh,
we have different relationships, very
yeah,
different looking on their face, but yet everything that we talked about whenever we'd have a conversation, it's the same relationship, isn't it? I mean, like we have the same
absolutely.
relationship dynamics, whether we're in a heterosexual relationship and a homosexual relationship, and it's just relationships. They seem to have the same challenges, right?
Yeah. I was just telling my buddy the other day, it was like, what happens when I stop labeling everything and just look at it from the pure lens of, okay, this is a human experience and relationships are human experience regardless of who they consist of. So, um, exploring my life through that kind of lens of what happens when I take off the label and put on, okay, this is simply a human experience. It makes things easier to process, but it also makes things more relatable.
Yeah.
And it allows you to connect with people in a deeper way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little bit of insight into our relationship. So, my relationship formed in the fire, so to speak. Mario
Mm.
and I met as we were going through ceremonies and healing work. And so, we've pretty much seen each other at our worst. And and it's enabled us to be very real with each other and have some really difficult conversations. But even both of us coming from the place of wanting to do that, it's how to do that in a way that is compassionate to both of us. And then you have been in a longer term relationship where you've done a lot of healing and growth too. So you want to share a little about yours?
Yeah, so my partner and I, we've been together. We just celebrated 10 years in March. And It's been an interesting journey because he's 8 years older than I am. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going through now, personally, he's already been through on in some ways. So it's nice to have somebody grounded who's already kind of like past the bullshit, so that I see, okay, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But also, we met when I was a junior in college, so I was 20, right about to turn
Oh, wow.
21. And so he was like, let's talk when you can go to the bar for a drink. which was which was very funny now when I look back on it. When I first met him, I was like, oh, what an ass. But I there was practicality behind that. So I appreciated it. But yeah, being in a long-term relationship and going through that whole process when you're going through your 20s, it's so awkward because you're unlearning all of the stuff that you learned growing up, and you're kind of discovering who you are, and you're figuring out your career, and you're trying to adult, and you have bills to pay, and rent and mortgage and all of that other stuff. And so it felt like I was just dealing with a lot and going through a lot. Um, in the process of building this relationship, but I was also just learning who I truly was in that process and over these past 10 years. And now I'm in this place of like, wow, I'm a completely different person than when we met.
Yeah.
But he was such an integral part in in me learning how to grow up and learning how to take care of myself and learning how to speak up for myself. And he's very direct. He's European, so there's no kind of like beating around the bush. It's like what you see is what you get, and I needed that because there were a lot of things in my life that I didn't necessarily want to look at or didn't want to acknowledge. And he's like, "No, let's address this and let's take care of it and move on." So, yeah, yeah.
Wow. And so I have to bring up one of the first funny things that happened between us when we were having these chats about our relationships. Hey, Johanna, thank you for being on with us tonight.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey Danielle,
Sherry,
hey
thanks for
Chris.
watching. Yeah, we want to say hey to you guys and be sure and interact. Let us know what your thoughts are and what your questions are. So, you were telling me all of this, and I'm going, wow, okay, so I'm 20 years older than you are, and you're in a long-term relationship, and mine is in its first couple of 3 years, whatever. But everything that you're saying that's happening to you between 20 and 30, like I'm there again. It's like we don't stop evolving, which is why we call this evolutionary relationships. We continue to evolve, and so can our relationships, but it really requires showing up for ourselves and being willing to talk about whatever the heck it is with our partners and being able to listen as they do the same with us. And so I was like, you know what, Donnie, this is the talk right here. It doesn't matter if it's a long-term relationship or not. We even went back and forth about the title on this a lot because you were like, well, let's talk about long-term relationships. And I'm going, this isn't just long-term relationships. This is all relationships, right? We're either growing
Absolutely.
together or we're growing apart.
Yeah.
And how do we evolve together and continue to renew ourselves and renew our relationship? Because what happens, it's like, in some ways, yeah, it's great that your partner's such a straight shooter and says, that we're going to deal with this stuff. But I know it's funny that sometimes we start to put people in boxes. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I've known you for a long time and I know that you like this and don't like that. And that changes. And so if we don't ever discuss that again, like, hey, you still don't like this, right? Or do you,
Yeah.
continue to keep the conversation fresh. Before long, we're both in these little bitty boxes of, okay, they don't like any of these things, smaller, 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 right?
Absolutely. I had that discovery the other day. It was like, oh wait, I've totally just been putting you a box around this particular issue. And that might not even be true. That could have been, 5 years ago. And so I've been operating in our relationship from that perspective of, oh, this is what this person thinks from this perspective or with regards to this particular topic. And that could be the biggest thing from the truth. And so it's really an invitation to get curious again and to connect with them and say, when we first met, you said that this was important to you. Is that still true?
Especially after like 10 years, right? Because
Yeah,
you guys are completely different people in many senses. And
yeah.
I shared with you that like I was in a 13-year marriage, and when I first started dating him, I said, and I'm really sick of flowers because it seemed like every guy I went out with gave me flowers. Please don't give me flowers. Well, 13 years later, I would love a bouquet of flowers. We like never have that conversation again. So yeah, how do you keep the conversations fresh without waking up and being like Groundhog Day and having the same conversation every day? Like, where is that balance, right?
Well, I think the first point is the realization of, oh, I've actually been putting you in a box about this, or this is this is how I've thought about it. Like for me, I'm thinking about like when we first got together, and I had this idealistic, romanticized idea of what it means to be in a relationship. So I did all the cheesy stuff, like bought cards or bought little notes and put them around the house. And one day he came to me, he was like, "You realize this is a waste of money, right?" And I'm like, "Wait, I thought that's what all people wanted their partner to do or their lover to do. You don't like that?" He's like, "Hell no. That money could go towards something else." So like, okay, well, now I know.
Wow,
Now
yeah.
I
So you
know.
bring up something important. You know, Mario talks about this a lot with me too, the love languages, right? So
Yeah.
if one person's love language is gifts, and bye Scott, thank you for being with us tonight. He's got to run. So if one person's love language is gifts and another one is looking for touch and affection, then we're not even speaking the same language to each other. And we're both starving to death for our language, but we don't even know what that is if we don't talk about it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just there's so many dynamics to this.
You know, I think my initial love language, I'm not even sure what my love language is anymore. I think my initial one was touch. And it was like, oh, hugs and to be cuddled and touched. And now I'm like, oh, it's hot. Get off, get off.
Get away from me. I'm sweating, right? Oh, well,
Exactly.
that's real romantic.
And so it's like, all right, well, do your love languages evolve with time too, or do they just become different, or do you just have different preferences? And I think part of it is just being in tune with yourself and what you want and need out of a relationship at that particular moment in time, and know that, oh, it could change from moment to moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're talking about the romantic side of things, but a lot more often what comes up is, man, they're driving me crazy. They're really getting on my nerves. These little things are driving me insane. And and it's like, if we come from a place of conscious awareness, which is where
Yeah.
I've been, moving toward, is like, okay, so that's really not even about them.
Yeah.
That's about me. So
Yeah.
how do I deal with that so I don't get irritated with them for doing that thing that's driving me crazy, right? When the buck stops here, there's a lot more work to relationships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So John is very playful, like extremely playful. And I need that in my life. And it reminds me, oh, I don't have to take myself so seriously, and I need to be playful. But then the other side of my playfulness is I can be super serious, get down to business, let's go, get things moving.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes when he's in his super playful mode, I'm in my super like focused business mode, and it's
Uh-huh.
this like clash
Yes.
because I I don't know how to come out of that. And I see him like hopping around or playing with the dog. It's like, ugh. And at the same time, it's that reminder of, oh, why am I so focused on this again? Or what is it? And when I reflected back on myself, it's like, wow, I haven't played in a really long time,
Yeah.
you know? And do I even
Absolutely.
remember what that looks like or what that feels like for me? Because I've been so focused or so work oriented or so goal oriented that I really just don't remember how to enjoy
Yes.
myself.
Yes. Hey, Clarissa. Hey, Jacqueline. Want to make sure to pop in here and say hi to you guys. Thanks for being with us tonight. Yeah, absolutely. It's like if we're in this relationship that's got many layers that work, like
Mm-hmm.
we do a serious side well together, we play well together, we do all these different things together. It's trying to align those moods and stay with a good variety of all of that. And it can get really easy, especially Mario and I do work together. So it
Yeah.
can be real easy for Mario and I to be, oh my God, we talked about work all day and all night, and now it's time to go to bed, and we forgot to play. What you're saying, we forgot to play. So, hey, Sherry.
Hey, Jacqueline.
So, yeah, how do you keep a little bit of balance? I think it's great though that, like you said, it makes me aware that I haven't been playing. So it's getting out of that being irritated and saying, what is this trying to show me? Where am I at a balance in my life? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
really where relationships can be like gold, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that I have a lot of Europeans in my life, really, to be, if I'm honest. And I was thinking, what is that about? But the more I spend time with them, the more I realize they have a very grounded way of thinking about their work and like their play. And
Yes.
when I go to the Azores with John, I mean it's this island in the middle of the Atlantic,
Oh,
and so
wow.
it's very kind of like peaceful and very simple, and it people are focused on really having a good quality of life and having this balance and enjoying themselves, and it's not really about having a lot of money or having a lot of things. People live very modestly, but they're happy. They're really, really happy, and they're really generous
Mhm.
people um, with regards to what they have, and they freely share it. And so it's been good to have a partner who continues to whose life continues to remind me of like, oh yeah, the American way isn't necessarily the only way, and it isn't necessarily the healthiest or the happiest way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I love travel for the same thing. It's like I can go somewhere else and go, oh yeah. And in our culture, I've been getting really caught up in this, and I could do better to bring some other stuff in. But you bring another point. So you go to this island and you're reminded. For me, I can do great when I'm traveling to go, oh yeah, I need to bring these things back into my life. But it's remembering that in the day to day, right? Because we get
Yeah.
caught up in the rat race and the whatever. So, what do you do to bring yourself back to that awareness of I'm getting out of balance, my relationship's getting, pushed back or whatever?
Yeah, for me, I'm becoming more in tune with my emotions and just listening to them, because generally if I'm annoyed or angry or bored, then it usually is an indicator for me of like, oh, something's out of whack. And
Hmm.
that's when I start looking at the different things that are happening in my world and saying, all right, is it work? Is it um, a conversation that I might need to have with John or with my family, or is it a conversation I need to have with myself, a come to Jesus moment? Like, what is it? Um, and when I take that time to slow down and just reflect and look at what's happening, um, then it gives me an opportunity to um, to be more intentional and to find more of that balance, because now I'm not on autopilot. I'm in reflection mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
What?
think it's it's to try and take care of a relationship, we have to really remember to take care of ourselves, because for me,
Absolutely.
wherever I'm empty, that's what's showing up in a negative way in my relationship. It's like, if I don't have patience to give, then I'm not giving myself patience. If I don't have compassion to give, then that's what I'm starving for. So if I can just look at Mario as a mirror, then I can figure out where I'm running short and what I need to give myself, right?
Oh man, so two things came up as you were sharing that. One was an incident that happened maybe like 2 weeks ago. So John is a driver for one of the waste management companies here, and so he's out on the road all day, and he's dealing with crazy people out on the road, and so he gets home and he's just like tense and frustrated. And so one day he came home and he was he was kind of snappy, and I just kind of tried to keep quiet and do my thing, and he was making some lunch, and then he turned around and just let out a deep breath, and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm just a little annoyed right now." And I looked and laughed. I was like, "Oh, I can tell." And at that moment, like I felt myself release and just acknowledge, "Oh man, I know what it's like to be annoyed from work or being stuck in traffic and stuff." And so, one, I could make space for him to be annoyed when I just acknowledged and laughed about the fact, like, oh, one, he's annoyed, and two, oh, I get annoyed too.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
it after that he started explaining a little bit about what happened, and then we just kind of like reconnected, and that was great. And the other piece that just came to mind. Oh, when I worked with cancer patients, I usually also worked with their caregivers or their spouses if the spouse wasn't the direct caregiver. And one of the things that you said is, oh, if you're not giving yourself kind of that self-care and patience, then you're definitely not going to get it to people and to the your loved one. And you see that um you see that more intensely, especially if someone is dealing with some kind of chronic illness, where the caregivers would come and they would be exhausted. And so they would have the guilt that they were exhausted and didn't have the bandwidth to take care of their loved one. And at the same time, they'd be angry and resentful because they just didn't have any more energy to give, but
Yes.
they didn't feel like they could go and take time for themselves. So they stayed in this cycle of exhaustion to resentment,
Yes.
exhaustion to resentment. Whereas if you can find the place and the practice to say, you know what, I'm feeling really tired right now, or I'm feeling exhausted right now, or I'm feeling kind of annoyed right now, and just say it for yourself. And if you feel comfortable saying it to your significant other, then it just makes space for whatever kind of emotions that you've been holding on to, and you don't have to
Mm-mm.
try and dance around it. And people see that you're annoyed, and you can just say, yeah.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
not hiding
yeah,
anything.
yeah. You mean the gray cloud that just walked in over you as
Yeah.
you enter? Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, really. That's great stuff. Yeah, you've learned a lot doing the cancer coaching, I'm sure. And
Absolutely.
it's stuff that we can all benefit from. Hey Tara, hey Hope, hey Deborah, great to see y'all join us.
Hey, Christine.
So today I was driving around, and the thing that kept coming through for me, we hear all this about like radical self-care and got to
Oh.
carve out that time. It's a very uh, pushy, almost offensive. Like, I know it's wonderful sentiment. I know people mean well with it, but what about compassionate self-care? What about actually stopping with all the radical pushing and got to do and got the checklists and all the, and just moving more to a place of being compassionate with myself, and in doing so maybe being a little more compassionate for the people around me, right?
Absolutely. My dad. I was talking to my dad on the way up here, and I was telling him about a situation that was going on professionally, and at first, like, I was like, I'm just so angry about it. And he started laughing at me and was like, you can be angry about it, but you being angry about it and then approaching them from their place of anger isn't actually going to do you any good. And it's probably going to be career limiting. So I suggest you figure out another way to deal with it. And
Yeah.
when I just acknowledge the fact of like, hey man, I'm disappointed that this isn't actually working out the way I wanted it to. And to have that
Mhm.
compassion for myself to say, oh, I'm disappointed or I'm annoyed, it it then gave me the ability to see what's happening in their world, and it's like I actually don't know what's happening in their world, so I could just be kind of the downhill. It could be on the downhill side of whatever is happening
Yeah.
for them, and so it's a good practice, but it's also a difficult practice because you don't want to be annoyed all the time.
Yeah. Or, there was that ego wants to be right.
Yeah,
So
for
there's
sure,
this whole
for
ego
sure.
conversation going on inside of I'm mad and I'm right and they're wrong. And we need to make sure that they understand that I'm right and they're wrong. And then we can move past it, right? And that right there is where it all gets screwed up, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's like we destroy the relationship trying to prove that we're right. And somewhere along the way, when the ego flares up and the emotion flares up, we forget how precious the relationship itself is to us,
Yeah.
because it's become all about this, who left the cap off the toothpaste. I'm just throwing that out there. But, we can get that way over stupid little stuff and destroy amazing relationships that have changed our lives. So, so it's, what do I do with that anger so that I don't take it out on the people I love and we can actually have a constructive conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think you and I were talking about this via Messenger or something the other day. Is like you can't hold on to the frustration or whatever and build an authentic connection or move towards an authentic connection because they're diametrically opposed in what you're able to give and communicate from. And so unless you actually take the time um, to acknowledge, hey, this didn't feel good, but with the end goal of saying, hey, I actually want to be more deeply connected to you, or I want to have more open communication with you, or I want to feel closer to you, then that's when you have the ability to move through kind of the messiness and the muckiness, even as uncomfortable as it is, or
Yeah.
what the conversations come up. I think about the conversations I've had with John that have been both uncomfortable or difficult, and generally every time after the dust is settled and we've moved through it, like my respect for him and my love for him and my appreciation for him is so much more because it's like, oh yeah, you're really a fucking cool human being, and I like
Yeah.
being around you, and I know that you have my back and that I can talk to you about anything, and there's just going to be moments where we don't agree on certain things, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what
Yeah.
did you think about when you were thinking about, wow, we're going to come on here tonight and we're going to talk about evolutionary relationships and how we renew ourselves together? Was there anything that you were like, I really want to make sure we talk about this?
um I didn't have anything in particular. Like, b- because of our exchanges over the past couple of days, like things have moved so quickly. So as soon as I think, I want to talk about this, it's like, what happened to that thought? It
We
changed
moved
into
through
something.
it. Yep. Yeah.
So maybe we open it up for some questions or thoughts.
Please. Yes.
Okay.
I'd love to hear from people. So, like, this is a time when all our stuff is coming up, and it's
Yeah.
really interesting because I know for a fact that whatever is not resolved in me is going to continue to show up in my relationship. So
Absolutely.
recurring patterns, recurring problems, recurring arguments, recurring painful things, all that junk is really just my stuff that I have not made peace with or learned how to deal with, presenting itself over and over and over again with different faces until I learn how to deal with it and get over it, or
Yeah.
heal it, or stand my ground, or create a boundary, or whatever the heck it is. So there's nothing to be embarrassed about, because we're all here to learn through relationships. That's why we called it evolutionary relationships. So this is a time when everybody's stuff is really coming up to be faced and dealt with. So
Yeah.
what's coming up for you that you're struggling to deal with without embarrassment, because your shit is our shit. I mean, there is just
Absolutely.
no shame here, right? Let's
Oh,
just call it what
amen.
it is.
Amen.
Okay, I can't see. Hang on. Just cover some of that in my morning meditation. Yeah, meditation's a great place to go with what's going on here, because that answer will definitely
It'll
show
come
up.
through. It'll come through. And John joined. So, hi, John. I'm not sure if he's still on. One of the things that's coming to mind right now is, how do you actually talk about needs? Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, your needs versus my needs, and what happened. It's great when they align, but what happens when they're different? And how do you make space for those two different pieces?
Yes, and they are, you're right. It's like it's great when they align, and the other 99% of the time, what are we doing to make this work, right? Because I'm in
Yeah.
my mood and you're in your mood, or you're in another state, or we're wherever we are. Absolutely. And I think it's so important that we speak the truth about what we need, and that we don't necessarily expect one human being to satisfy all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least those have been two big things for me. Like, you can't be my everything.
Yeah.
That'd be beautiful, but that's a heck of a burden to put on another human being. And
Absolutely.
so I
Absolutely.
think it's great to have friendships that support that, and that we just learn how to. Half of it is knowing what we need, right? Like, oh, I've been cranky for a month. Oh, I didn't realize I'm needing whatever. So, how do you get clear on what you're needing?
Um, it's a work in progress. uh, lately, lately, connection has been coming up for me, and not just physical connection, but just like emotional and friendship connection. And one of the things that I was telling John, and it didn't hit me until maybe a few months ago, where like I realized all of my, I shouldn't say all, but a majority of my closest friends who I grew up with or who I met in college no longer live here. And so I can't call them up to say, hey, let's go to a movie, or let's go out to grab a bite to eat, or, let's go for a hike or something. And so I felt really lonely, even though I'm in a relationship. And it's something completely different. Like John is dear to me, and he's my friend, my best friend, and my lover. But there's something different about having a significant other, um, who also is your friend, and just having uh, the other types of friendships that human beings need, because they do fulfill a different need, and you don't want to put that burden on your partner, because that's a lot. That's a lot. I remember one of my mentors, she said, as soon as I stopped making my husband my therapist, my girlfriend, my business partner, and all of this, and I just let him be my husband, we had such a great time. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's resonating with me. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to be with our best friend. And
Yeah,
Mario is definitely all of that. I mean, he's an
yeah,
amazing partner. And I realize sometimes that, oh my gosh, not only do I lean on that a ridiculous amount at times. But I can also be the first to take that for granted. And even though I'm not necessarily
Mm.
taking it for granted in my heart, am I really expressing that, wow, today you've been the therapist, the garbage man, the IT person, the business consultant, the lover, the friend, like, wow, if I had to pay you for all of that, I'd be taking out one heck of a loan, right?
Oh, yeah, I can take it for granted too. Oh, totally, totally, totally. Wow,
So I love
wow.
it. Hope says, yeah, yes, becoming aware of what's going on or stepping back and looking at the situation and how you react to it. It all changes when we can be more aware of ourselves as the observer of ourselves instead of being lost in, I'm seeing you from my perspective and all the focus is on you, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, what I want you to
Mhm.
be doing, what you're not doing. If I can see my role in that and watch both of us together, I can see such a different picture than just if I look at you and have my judgments about you, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's easy to nitpick, and hey, Noel, I'm glad you could join me, bud. Yeah, it's easy to nitpick and figure out, okay, well, that's not working, and why is he doing that, and why didn't it look like this? And after a while, like I get tired of hearing my own self nag. It's like, oh, poor thing. Like it's just like, God bless you. But when I get in that mode, I realize that's often what I do with myself is like I can just
Yes.
pick myself apart. And my dad and my mom, they'll
Yes.
always tell me, they're like, you are your worst critic. I don't think you know what like
Yes.
good enough looks like or what, a good partner looks like.
Yeah.
And one of my actually it was funny, in my meetings with my boss, he's like, can you just stop and just be proud of something that you've done instead of like moving on to the next thing and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I realized just how often I do that in my life and how often I do that in different aspects of my life. And so it's this new practice for me of, okay, I'm in nitpicking mode, and what am I nitpicking about, and where do I do this to myself, and how do I stop doing that? Because that in itself isn't compassionate or
Yes.
loving.
Absolutely. And Mario, you're right. And we
Yeah.
know that what we focus on expands.
Yep.
And still, like that monkey mind will just be pick, 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 pick. And thank God all of our thoughts don't go up as billboards as we think that. Can you just imagine? I would have no friends. Nobody would be around me. They'd be going, oh my God, look at what she's thinking now. Right? It's just brutal up there. And I grew up with a very critical mom. She was
Mm.
very harsh on her. And when people are like that, what I know for a fact is that we're like that to ourselves the most.
Yeah.
So the most critical person in the world, be glad you're not inside their body, because whatever they are to you, that's 10 times worse in there. And I
Oh.
grew up around that and I didn't really ever understand that, but now she lives inside of me and I get it. And it's like retraining that mind, and that's some of the coaching work that I do, because
Um,
it's powerful when we can still the mind and notice the thoughts and reprogram them. But still, the minute we get lost and busy, all that other stuff starts to come back until we have to stop and go, oh, there I am again. God, it's noisy in there.
oh.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh.
We laugh a lot, and I just want to say something about that. That's one of my favorite things about our connection, is that even though we're different ethnically, we're in very different relationships, we have age differences, we live half a country apart from one another. Like, we have so much different, but we both own ourselves, which is very refreshing. And I think that's really important in relationships. I
Yeah.
own myself, warts and all. This is me. And
Yeah.
I take responsibility for me. And that sense of humor that we keep laughing, like, if you take this stuff too seriously, it's going to be really brutal. So that sense of
Uh,
humor is so refreshing.
it's so needed. It's so needed.
Yeah.
You know, maybe this is where we spice up the conversation a little bit. And I was thinking about this with regards to like intimacy and sex, and how do you bring a sense of humor to the intimate part of your relationship or to the sex part of your relationship? Because I mean, people have so much stuff around sex, whether it's shame or guilt or whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm finding the more that we can kind of laugh about it and be playful and curious about it and be curious about it in a relationship, the more it just becomes fun.
Yeah.
It becomes fun.
Yeah. That's true of all of it, right? It's like the more we laugh at any aspect of our relationship, it's like that laughter gives us permission to be human
Yeah.
and to accept whatever the heck shows up. Especially, and you're talking about, and sex and intimacy are the same and not the same, right? Because we can
Yeah.
have the most intimate conversation or just moment of looking in each other's eyes or whatever. And laughter just is such a beautiful facet to a relationship. I've been in relationships that didn't have a sense of humor, and they were difficult. They were
I
really
believe it.
difficult. Yeah, I
I
think that's a
believe
key thing to have. And I love the feedback here we're getting on our laughter. It's important, man. It's a success strategy in of itself. Laughter in the bedroom, in it wherever.
it. uh,
Wherever.
Hi,
And
Michelle. Hi, Rachel.
And you said adventure, and that's really it. Like I think approaching the whole relationship, whatever the heck we're doing, as an adventure. I mean, Mario can have and I can have an adventure just driving around. We just, what's going on in your head today? What's going on in your heart today? What's new for you? What's coming up for you? Just having the conversations that we may not tend to have when we're really lost in the day-to-day stuff.
um, you know, yeah, you need that adventure. I think that's an important part of I don't want to say keeping the juice going because that's a kind of a bad analogy, but it, I think that's part of the success strategy
Yeah.
is like there needs to be adventure. And it doesn't have to be
Yes.
these elaborate trips. It could just be adventures into new conversations that you've never had before.
Yes.
Mhm.
And you mentioned an age difference earlier, and we have one as well. And I think that's great because we do things together that we might not do together if we were closer in age. Like one's
Yeah.
always bringing a different dynamic from the age difference. And as romantic as the notion is of being a couple that's always isolated together, I think bringing other people into the relationship, is socializing with other people, going out into the world. Like, I don't know that all that isolation for a long period of time, I think it's healthy to miss each other sometimes. I think it's healthy to bring in other people. What do you think?
Yeah. I think so too. I think for me, um I'm just thinking about everything that I learned about relationships and kind of growing up in the South and the um, the approach to relationships, and now actually being in one, I realized, oh yeah, that one that's not sustainable. So, with regards to your question, I think you have to have time apart, and um, I think it's healthy to have your own lives. For me, I'm realizing that's the piece that I was missing for a long time, where I felt like, I needed to do everything with John, and he was always like, go do your own thing. But it was my stuff around, like, oh, not wanting to go and have my own life and do my own thing. And now that I'm just getting more comfortable with myself and my own needs, I'm realizing, oh, it's nice to be by myself because I get to be introspective and I get to um, do things that I enjoy without kind of any concern or guilt about whether or not he's enjoying himself. And
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise I'll be preoccupied and looking at him like, is he really enjoying this or is he not? And vice versa. Um, and so you can come back and talk to each other about the experience if you want to, but you don't
Exactly.
necessarily have to do it together.
Yes. It brings fresh stuff to the conversation, which I think is
It
great.
does. It does.
Well, Mario's asking, how do you start a difficult conversation? And I think it's funny he's asking this question because we have had
Uh,
plenty of these difficult conversations. And I can feel, when you're in tune with your partner, you can feel it coming. It's like, oh, I'm starting to get that feeling. Here we go again. It, and for me, if I know that it's time for me to speak my truth about something, and the sooner the better, I have to say the sooner the better, because keeping that stuff inside, it leaks out all over the place. It leaks out when we don't want it to. It
yeah.
leaks out in a bad mood. It leaks out in being short and snippy. It leaks out in all kinds of places. So when I've become aware that there's something that I really need to share, and I don't necessarily feel like it's going to be exciting on the other end. Um, the first thing I do is put myself square in my heart. I get
Mm-mm-mm.
out of my head and into my heart, and I really feel the connection that I have to the person, to Mario, or to whoever that's about. And I say, I really need to talk to you about something. And I don't know how this is going to go, but I need to tell you what's going on.
Um,
And I feel this massive lump in my throat, right? Because I don't want to be having this conversation either, but I know I have to say my truth. And then I just, with all the love in my heart, imagining how it's going to feel to the person receiving it, I do the best job to speak my truth in a way that respects both of us equally.
yeah.
I respect your feelings, my feelings, and I say, I I really don't care for this that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm feeling. And I use I statements. It's not about
Yeah.
you're doing this and you're doing that. It's I feel this and I need this and I want this and I don't want that. And and I'm just speaking my truth. And it's not your job to fix any of that. But I
Yeah.
need to tell you what I'm feeling and own it. And then we can kind of fumble our way through that awkward conversation, which is like being blindfolded, right? It's gut
Oh
wrenching
man.
sometimes.
Oh
Oh my God.
yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that your experience? How do you do things maybe differently than I do? What can you share?
So mine is a little less tactful. But I'm learning. um, so usually it ends up in some kind of explosion because I've been stewing over it for a bit. And John's like, dude, why didn't we talk about this a long time ago when it first bothered you, or why didn't you just tell me it bothered you from the get go, and we could have addressed it. Um, and a lot of that is my own stuff around learning how to just be comfortable being vulnerable and
Hmm.
saying, "Oh man, this hurt my feelings or this didn't make me feel very good," and then I start going through my head around, "Oh, you're weak, you can't."
Yeah.
And
Oh God.
all this other stuff. It takes a lot of work to live in Donnie. But then once I get through my own gunk, um, and really get to the heart of it, um, and just come from, like you said, that heart centered place of, oh, this didn't feel good to me, and it didn't feel good to me because I felt lonely, or I felt sad, or I felt
Hmm.
disappointed, and getting into the emotion of it. Um, Kind of helps me get to the truth of it. It helps me speak the
Yes.
truth of it, because I'm no longer hiding from, as Jacqueline said, I'm no longer hiding from the fear of, what's
Yes.
John gonna think, or if it's something at work, what or one of my colleagues gonna think.
Well, and thank you for bringing up fear, Jacqueline. That's absolutely it. Fear of, and this has been my biggest shift in the last few years is learning how to be in a place in a relationship where we are both there fully by choice, one day at a time.
Yeah,
And either any day, one of us could change our mind. And that really took me into my shit around fear of abandonment, around fear of everything. I mean, I went through every kind of fear you can imagine is like, but don't I need like a ring on my finger? Don't I need a commitment? Don't I need to know that this is gonna like it took a lot of adjusting and I still go through waves of it. So the
yeah,
fear is definitely real, but what it's teaching me is that my first duty of care, my first relationship is to me, and learning how to be in that, and also realize that I can keep changing partners till the cows come home, but I'm still right here. Like if the
yeah,
problem is if the problem keeps showing up, maybe I need to get over it and quit just change. That's a lot of work to go through all that just to come back to the same problem with a brand new face on it. Like
yep,
maybe I need to do the work. Um, so yeah, there's a lot to it.
yeah,
Relationships are the core of everything that I believe that we come here to learn.
yeah,
It doesn't play out there. It plays out in our closest relationships, in our family, in our love lives, in the closest relationships at work or in business. That's where everything shows up to be healed. And I guess at 52, I can say that I'm getting a lot more comfortable with fear because we
yeah.
are long time, long time traveling partners here. We've been doing this a long time.
Well, I think you were saying like relationships and business are kind of two of the your greatest spiritual growth
Yes.
outlets, and it's true because relationships do bring up your stuff. And I know for me, and being with someone who's older, and he's very grounded, and he has his shit together, and so it makes me see all the places where I don't feel like I'm established, or I don't feel like I'm grounded, or I haven't done the things that I expected that I would have done by the time I hit 31, and moving
Mm-hmm.
through that kind of stuff. And it's never been any kind of external push from him. It's always been my own stuff, but it's just that mirror, and that comparison
Yes.
mode of like, oh man, why am I not there? Why am I not there? And I think I saw Michelle's message around, is it difficult because of your own vulnerability, or is it difficult because you're concerned about hurting the other person's feelings? And I, I think it's a mixture of both, because you have this deep level of respect and appreciation and love for this person, so you don't want to hurt them. And at the same time, the other piece that's coming up for me now is not, it's not necessarily about being vulnerable, but it's about what happens when I speak my truth more. What's going to happen to the relationship, or where is it going to go?
Mm-hmm.
And it taps back into what you were saying about this fear of the unknown. Like, I don't know. So we're still traveling together in our day to day and moment to moment. Um, but what happens if he does say okay? And
Mm-hmm.
now that I've kind of embraced this idea of, oh, you live moment to moment and enjoy the relationship as it goes, there's this calmness and relief that comes with that. But it also allows me to enjoy the relationship more for what it is, rather than being in my head and in the future about what if and no, I don't know what's gonna happen and all that other stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, and and Jacqueline's saying something now too about being a people pleaser, and that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
taps back into what Mikkel said about hurting other people's feelings. I was I was raised to be just an award-winning people pleaser. I mean, I'm not just a people pleaser. I've got awards on the wall for how pleased other people were with my achievements and my whatever. I believe that I needed to earn love.
Yeah.
That was like somewhere my wires got crossed, and I believed I had to be good enough to earn love and deserve love, and that praise was love and recognition was love. And so I had that people pleaser really drilled into me from an early age. And now what I understand is, if I'm so worried about hurting your feelings that I'm not speaking my truth, the truth is I'm sitting here with my own feelings hurt. Hi,
Oh.
Beverly.
Hi Rob.
It's
Hi
not okay
Maria.
for my feeling, like if my feelings have to be hurt so your feelings aren't hurt, then I'm sacrificing myself. And I don't
Yeah.
believe in that anymore. I've
Yeah.
finally reached a point in my life where I'm like, this has to be a no sacrifice relationship. If I
Yeah.
have to sacrifice who I am to make you happy, then that's not truly a relationship. That
Yeah.
is the illusion of a relationship. And I need to be able to be in my truth and take care of my feelings, and have you be adult and take care of your feelings. And if I say something that's going to hurt you, I'm going to say it as softly as I can. But ultimately, what I've also learned is that if it's triggering something for you, I can't make you hurt. I can say something that's uncomfortable, and
Mm-hmm.
then we can talk about why you're hurting. And I can be here for you while you move through that hurt. I've
Yeah.
said things to Mario that I know hurt his feelings, and he said things to me that hurt my feelings. And then we have found a way to be there for each other to heal the hurt, which is not to say that I hurt your feelings and then I say a bunch of things that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
It's to say that I speak my truth, and when that hurts you, you get really quiet, and I say, I know that that hurt, and I want to talk about that because I feel like where you went with that is not what I meant. Because
Yeah.
honestly, what usually happens is a hurt is actually triggering some pain in somebody from their
Yeah.
whenever.
Yeah.
And when we can really go into that together with love, it can help you see, oh my gosh, that wasn't even you that hurt me. That reminded me of when somebody said that to me 10 years ago, and it really hurt me to the core. And I just felt like that all over again. And heal that together,
Hmm.
and then it won't hurt the next time, right? So
Yeah.
that's to me what an evolving relationship is let's do this together, and let's stop all this pain that we're just triggering in each other back and forth, and heal together.
As you were sharing that, what kept coming to mind for me is how we have this idea of people are fragile.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we hold on to people are fragile or relationships are fragile, then it's damn near impossible to have any type of authentic relationship and connection because you're constantly like having to tiptoe around
Yes.
this fragility. And I'm thinking about like myself is I've seen myself as this fragile human being. So sometimes
Mm-hmm.
even though John is being very direct with me and he's just saying what he wants and needs, he's like, "Oh, I'm just saying what I want and need." And I'm like, "You said the meanest thing to me. How could you do that?" And it's so not true. It's so not true whatsoever. Um, but to move into this place to say, "Oh, we're two adults who can handle truth and handle respect and handle honesty." That gives the relationship breathing room to really flourish and to grow and to enjoy one another, good, bad, ugly, warts and all.
Yes, yes. We are so much stronger than we even know that we are. And the whole victim thing is just one way of looking at things, and it's so beautiful when you can help somebody that you love realize that instead of hearing that statement as as it being about you in an attack way or in a way that's meant to hurt you. Like, let's really talk about what I just said there, because what I just said there was about me anyway. It wasn't even, if we're using I statements and saying I feel and I need and I think, then how could that hurt you, what I feel and I need and I, like, that just doesn't even fit, right?
Yeah. 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 Wow. Wow.
Well, another word flew by a while ago, and it's just come back around because we had a little brief conversation about it, and that was expectations. Like,
Oh,
man, if there is something that can be the elephant in the room, it is the idea that, and I think I was married for a few years before I realized that what I thought a marriage looked like wasn't the same thing as what my husband thought a marriage looked like. But we didn't
yeah.
really talk about that. We
Yeah.
talked about, how are you about money? When do you want babies? What do you do? The checklist before you get married. But we didn't talk about the day-to-day life of, this is what I think a husband looks like, and oh, good, this is what I think a wife looks like. And like, it's so vital to be in a relationship where we talk about what we really are, where our expectations aren't lining up with what's actually showing up in our relationship all the time. Am I making sense? Like,
You are. You are. I think we need to go on tour and write a book that's the handbook for, like, here are the real conversations you need to have before you get married.
yes.
Hey, Ford. Oh man,
Yes.
expectations are. I think that those are those would probably be some of the most beneficial conversations that, long-term couples could have, new couples could have, people just dating could have, because it helps set the stage for how you communicate with each other. Whereas we go in having this long list of expectations, thinking, oh yeah, we communicated that, not saying a thing. And then you have this interaction with your significant other, and they do something that pisses you off or upsets you, and you're like, wait, but I told you that I didn't like this a long time ago. And they're looking at you like, are you kidding? We've never had this conversation before. And it's yeah, it makes things difficult and interesting when you don't actually address your expectations or have
Mhm.
them share their expectations.
Or even realize that we have them. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said,
Yeah.
I was years into my marriage when I realized that the expectations that I had never really owned or verbalized or even clarified or nonetheless shared with my partner weren't
Yeah.
being met. And it had been a source of frustration for me. And the poor guy didn't stand a chance because I didn't even know I was expecting it. So how the hell could he know I was, like, and even to now, I'll do that with Mario. I'll be like, oh my God, I just caught myself expecting that you would know that I wanted this or do that, or like, they're everywhere, those expectations. You should read my mind. You should know what I want in bed. You should know when I want to go to bed. You should know, you should just know because you're my guy.
You've been with me for
Wow.
10 years. You know what to expect. Hey, Carnell.
Yeah.
Oh man. So then, how do you have those conversations around expectations?
I think the best place to have those conversations is with ourselves, because it really is me now catching myself going, before I even have the conversation with him, I try to have the conversation with me. What on earth am I frustrated about right now? Is this something that I asked him for that he's not doing? Is this something that it isn't even about him? Is this an expectation I have that we've never even talked about? Is this one of my insecurities showing up? Like, getting real with myself before I take it all out on him. And that
Um,
really has taken me a lot of years to calm down, because I'm quite a little firecracker. So
uh,
I think maturity helps me kind of get still first and go, what the heck is going on here?
People tell me, they're like, "Oh, you seem so calm and relaxed." I'm like, "Yeah, the other side of that is Godzilla." So, there's a nice balance. I try to keep Godzilla at bay, but alas, sometimes he tends to come out, and it just damages everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you guys want to talk about that we're not? We're really running the gamut here. I mean, this is what we
Yeah.
do. We just kind of start talking and keep talking about relationships. We could do this all day long. So, is there something that you guys want to touch on, or that we? I saw a couple of things kind of went by while we were talking, and I hope I didn't miss anybody's questions or whatever. I'll kind of
Let's
scroll
see.
here and see if I can see what's going
I went ahead and urged to write this, and then I came across your live. It's more about valuing, learning, and growing from each other. Oh, absolutely. I think
on.
that was
Yes.
Sandra.
Yeah, that's the one I just got to. Thank you. It is absolutely about learning and growing with each other. Going into a relationship is creating a shared playground for learning and fun and growth. And I think we forget the fun part too often, or it's not about having somebody to take it out on when we have a bad day. It's not about having a live-in shrink. It's not about it really is supposed to be about having fun together and growing together and sharing the life experience. And honestly, it can be about having a live in shrink, but I think the most important thing is whatever it's about. And you and I had this conversation a few days ago. Ultimately, I believe that relationships are an agreement.
Mm,
They're an agreement between two people to be together and to share life in a way that they agree to share it.
yeah.
And that looks very different around the world. We have every kind of relationship imaginable nowadays. There's a lot of people in judgment about some should look different. That's that's their handbook on relationships. That's not
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
So thank you for your opinion. You can keep it over there. I'm having my relationship and I don't really care what you think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
and but the two people that are in the relationship need to be in on the agreement, and that's where expectations comes up and all this other stuff, like, oh yeah, I was having a relationship with one over here and expecting you to read my mind. Like that doesn't work.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Because I've tried to put I've tried to put my same gender homosexual relationship into a heterosexual relationship, and it just doesn't. They're the same in terms of it's these two human beings coming together and you're sharing this life experience, but they're also very very different, and they have their own nuances. And I think about my parents who have been together for 45 years, and they've been through a lot of stuff together. And if I have candid conversations with my parents, like there were times where it's really just difficult, and like you don't know whether or not it's going to work. And
Hmm.
so my kind of frame of reference was their relationship, but now I'm in a same-sex relationship, and there's they didn't give me the handbook or the guidance for that one because they didn't know. and
Yeah.
and so you can't, it's hard to say, this is what your relationship is going to look like, or this is what your relationship should look like. um because there are a whole lot of different dynamics going on, and you have two different human beings who have different needs and different come from different life experiences. And so it's really hard to look for relationship advice outside of your relationship, which is why
Yes.
you have to you really have to take the time to understand what you need from that relationship and what the other person needs from that relationship.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
s-
Thank you for sharing that. And
yeah.
Mario and I come from different cultures because
Mm,
he comes from the Mexican culture and I come from the American culture with a lot of German in my background. So
yeah.
our cultural differences are very different. There are so many different nuances to relationships that I come back full circle to. It's an agreement between the people in it.
Yeah.
Whatever works for you is great, but you have to communicate that. You have to make that as conscious agreement. And with that said, some things don't serve the relationship well, which I come to this comment about codependent relationships.
Yeah.
I grew up around that, and I have done a lot of work around codependency. Codependent No More is a fabulous book by, I think, Melanie Beatty. And ultimately, rather than fighting against codependency, because that just, what we resist persists.
Mm,
So
mm-hmm.
blending consciousness with psychology is like saying, okay, it's great to not want a codependent relationship, but if I don't want a codependent relationship, then I'm continuing to create the flip side of a codependent relationship, which is still putting codependency in charge, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm either on the positive side of it or the negative side of it, but it's still all about codependency, and I did not want that anymore. So for me, it is about learning to respect myself and take care of myself and then respect the other equally. But I know that I have to come first because I have to take care of myself first. So there is me first and then you rather than you first and then me.
Um,
But I do fully respect you and respect your feelings and love you. But I know that I have to take care of myself first. And when we take care of the other, when everybody's taking care of the other person and not themselves, it it ultimately spins out of control.
yeah.
It takes different amounts of time for different relationships, but codependent relationships are not healthy because nobody's taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
Everybody's focused on the other, and the only one we can change is ourselves. We can't change the other, so it kind of gets to some tricky dynamics there.
And
Do you
the
want to add
other,
anything about codependency?
I do. I was just thinking about this. It ends up being this power struggle, and
Yes.
so your relationship ends up being about um, who can be more in control than the other, and then that sucks the juice and the romance and everything
Yes.
else out of the relationship, because now the relationship is about you being dominant and the other person being submissive, or the other person being dominant and you being submissive, and then you build resentment and anger and frustration, and that ends up being a disaster, so your relationship blows up. Whereas if you if you can take some time to say, hey, this is feeling a little codependent, or I'm feeling some kind of struggle between the two of us, can we actually address that and have a conversation around that? Then it opens up the conversation for each of you to express what's happening for you right now in the moment, um, but
Mm-hmm.
also allows you to have some space to say, all right, well, here's actually what I'm needing out of a relationship, and you get to listen to what the other person is needing, and then from there you can make a more conscious, empowered, kind of like nourishing decision around, okay, is this excuse me, is this actually a good relationship for me to be in, or do I need to consider ending the relationship? And so I think the more you can have a conversation around the tension, even as comfortable as it might be, the better it's going to be for you long term, because you will both feel respected and appreciated and whole within the relationship.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I often see in codependent relationships is one ends up being more like the parent and the other ends up like one's trying to parent the other one and the other one sounds like the child. And so there's this
Mm.
resentment over you're always in charge of the money or you're always in charge of the sex or like that power struggle, that power dynamic doesn't work in a romantic relationship. You end up like parent and child, and nothing sucks the romance or the sex out of a relationship faster than somebody being like your parent or your child. I mean, it's just not
Yeah,
romantic. So,
yeah,
yeah, there's that too. Jacqueline, hi Nora, thanks for joining us. Jacqueline's asking about what to do when the other partner is more reluctant about opening up. Do you want to speak to that some, Donnie?
Yeah, because I've been that partner. If I'm super honest, um, quite frankly, it can be annoying. Let's just call it what it is. And it can be annoying because oftentimes it feels like you're coming back to the same conversation over and over and over again because the person isn't opening up and really saying what they need to say, or get whatever's on their mind off. and
Mhm.
and it can be exhausting and draining. And I know just from my relationship, John's like, why are you rehashing this again? And I realize part of it has just been my own kind of discomfort around saying, "Oh, this is actually really hard and uncomfortable for me to talk about." And so
Mhm.
it's not even about you. It's really that person's comfort level with saying, "Oh, this is something that I struggle with." And that requires some kind of vulnerability, and it also requires some kind of acknowledgement of, oh shit, here's the area of my life where I actually don't have my shit together, and this person is
Mhm.
forcing me to look at it. So for you, Jacqueline, I think part of part of the gift you could give yourself and the gift that you could give the other person, and maybe you've already done this, is to say, hey, here's what I'm noticing whenever we come to this particular topic is it seems like it's really difficult for you to talk about this.
Mhm.
And I just want to acknowledge that because I want you to know that I'm here to have that conversation with you whenever you want to have it. But I can't read your mind around this. I can't do anything differently or try things differently if you don't share with me what's going on. And usually that'll end up opening the conversation, or the other side of that is the person will say, oh, I really don't know how to address this. I don't even know where to begin.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. That's great. And for Mario, part of his journey has been learning how to be more open and discuss feelings. He did not do as much of that as I did growing up.
Mm,
So
mm-hmm.
I'm very used to talking about my feelings, and he has kind of had to. I had to drag him along and go, "Come on, I really want to know." And it's funny because in my perception, I'll be feeling like he's not sharing something with me, and he'll look at me and go, "You know, I tell you more than I talk about this to anybody else ever. Like I feel like I'm spilling my guts, and you and you're
he
asking me to talk about it, right?"
he feels like he's made this quantum leap, and you're like, that was only like that
I
much.
know. And especially when it's usually the things that people don't talk about. I mean, there is the whole thing of I'm not used to talking about my feelings,
Yeah,
but then there's
yeah,
also oftentimes where we really clam up is where we have the hardest time speaking our truth. And
yeah,
so, how can, and I'll ask him, how can I make this easier for you to talk about? And I'll really feel with my heart into what I'm feeling from him and say, I'm feeling this. Is that accurate? Is that kind of matching
mm,
what you're feeling? Like I'll actually try and navigate in there, and I'll tell him, stop me, if you don't want to go there. So I
yeah,
try and create the most loving environment possible to open up in, and then I have to respect that when he wants to open up, he will, and kind of leave it at that. But
yeah,
yeah, it can be frustrating because you really want to be with that person. That is intimacy, right? How
yeah.
much can we expose ourselves to one another to really get real?
Yeah, yeah. Before we move on to the next little part, because I had a few thoughts, I just wanted to check in with Carnell and Jacqueline to see if that was helpful at all, or if
Yeah,
you
how
had
are
some
we
of your
doing?
your questions answered.
And while we wait for your comment, I want to say we're going to do this again. I
Yeah,
love talking about relationships with Donnie. We've got to do this on Facebook Live a little more often. This is really fun.
I'm totally in. Just let me know. And I'm from a cultural perspective. Um, black men in the South, they didn't go see a therapist. You went to the church. You might have talked to a pastor if you were having a problem, and otherwise you just didn't. Jacqueline Good and Carnell Good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just didn't talk about it. And so, for John, like, and I think just being European, like, they've just always had open conversations. And so that's just been a part of the way that they've been brought up. And for me, um, it's like you didn't talk about your feelings, or you didn't talk about things that you struggled with because of how people might perceive you or what they might think, or the list goes on. And so I imagine it's similar in the Mexican culture, where you don't talk about your feelings. You man up and you buck up and you act tough and you go on and do your thing. But uh, you don't end up seeing the long-term impact of that until you get into relationships with people, and you have to have some uncomfortable or difficult conversations, and then you realize you feel like caveman. Like, no compute. or whatever, because you haven't had that practice, and it's a muscle and it's a skill that you have to learn, and it takes some work. And so it's nice to have a partner who is open to having those conversations and who can kind of facilitate that. And at the same time, like, I understand it's also very frustrating for you as well, because it comes so naturally to you. Whereas for us, it feels like we're a baby learning to walk. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even as freely as I speak about things, there there are areas where my voice is shut down too. So I just keep going back to that and going, okay, I can equate this to, but so I went through sexual abuse when I was a kid. And so for me, speaking freely, finding my voice in the bedroom has been a challenge for me. And
Yeah.
so we all have some aspect where we are still learning to speak our truth. And so remembering that our partner has those too, and just helping each other through those is really
Mhm.
where the growth happens, right?
Yeah, yeah. For me, mine has been around sex and my sexuality and what that means, and not necessarily learning how to get past kind of the religious shaming and demonizing
Hmm.
it, and learning how to say, "Oh no, I'm a good human being and I'm a solid human being," and learning how to reaffirm myself and my sexuality. And it's an interesting process because John is he's just very in tune with himself in all aspects of his life, or with regards to sex or with regards to sexuality. And so he's a good model for me in terms of learning how to figure that out on my own. But sometimes when conversations come up around sex or sexuality, like, I clam up because, like, can I talk about that, or I shouldn't talk about that,
Hmm.
or this is uncomfortable. But it's also that reminder for me of, oh no, this is a part of my humanity, and so I do need to learn how to talk about it, and I should feel comfortable talking about it and embracing it, because it's just a part of who I am.
Absolutely. And you brought up the R word, so you don't have to be in any kind of a minority style of relationship to have religious baggage around sex. I got to
Oh,
tell you.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. I grew up in the church, and yeah, I was raised with a lot of baggage around sex. It's the thing everybody's doing that nobody's supposed to talk about, and we're only supposed to
Exactly.
do it this way at this
Exactly.
age for this long and for this purpose. And Oh my goodness. I think we're all healing some of that and finding our truth and finding our way. And it's so funny because a lot of that finding happens as we have conversations about
Yeah.
it. And so if we grew up not able to have those conversations because shh, we don't talk about sex. So if we don't talk about it, how do I learn about it? How do I even understand it, right? But shh, we don't talk about it. It's just really kind of ridiculous. So I think we learn as we go, and just healing that and being able to say yes, we talk about sex, and yes, it's a natural thing, and um yeah, we just have all those layers to peel off to get to intimacy.
Absolutely. And I think about a lot of my friends here. They have kids between newborns, between newborns and uh, between newborns and probably the age of 10. And as they're getting older, the kids are asking about sex. And so, for the most part, a lot of my friends are very just candid about it and will tell them information that's age appropriate, but they're real about it. They don't try and hide it or sugarcoat it. And I have a nephew who is 11 and I have a nephew who's 13, and they're starting to have those types of conversations with my sister and my brother-in-law. And the thing I keep telling them is like, look, if you don't take the time to have those conversations, even as uncomfortable as they are, they're going to go and learn it from their classmates and learn all the wrong stuff. And then they're going to have this distorted view of what sex is and what it can be, and the joys of it, but also like the realities of it. And I believe you personally want them to be able to talk to you about anything. So if you can have those types of conversations with them and be honest with them about them, then they're going to trust you more in the long term when they're having difficulty and they want some like real practical wisdom, not 14 and 15-year olds who have been on
Yeah.
Instagram or Tumblr or whatever looking looking at porn and other stuff.
Uh-huh. Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shame. Shame is such a funny thing. It's funny and it's
Yeah.
also sad at the same time because, like you said, everybody has sex and we're doing it, and yet we can't talk about it.
Hmm. And to even be ashamed of the urges because it's we're not supposed to be doing
Yeah,
that or whatever. I mean, it's
yeah,
like there's just so many layers, and I know that I came back to do a lot of healing around sex, and I have been, and still it seems like there's so much
yeah.
more to learn and experience and heal, and it's a big part of who we are, and because we keep it locked away for certain hours and certain people in conversations, it takes a long time to get there.
It does. This when I first started working at Juniper, I was on this panel that was around how to be an ally to the LGBT community, and so it was this great panel, and um, the conversations were great. And then afterwards, some of the HR leaders came up to me and we started talking, and they were saying, you talk so freely and so openly, and we generally, that's not kind of um, protocol in corporate. And they were tiptoeing around, like, oh, the African American community or the LGBT community or whatever. I was like, I'm black. You can say I'm black, and like you saw their face like get mortified. I was like, look, it's what I am. It's my experience, and I'm gay, and that's part of my experience too. And so you don't have to do that. And I'm realizing more and more that the more we kind of try and cover up what is, the more we actually move away from any type of healing, because you're still trying to sugarcoat things. You're trying to make them look pretty. And so the part that I love about um, the coaching work that we get to do outside of corporate is, oh yeah, we get to make sex a part of the conversation, because
Yeah.
there's creative energy in sex, and you can bring that same creative energy to your business or to your relationships or to new projects that you're working on. So even though, sex is one aspect, the sexual energy and the kind of creative energy that's underneath it expands so many different areas of our lives that we're actually missing out on it when we don't talk about it.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. What a great conversation. I have no idea what time it is. Have
I
we been
had
like doing this?
I just got this notification saying my battery was about to die, so I'm like, oh, I guess that
Well, then we
conversation.
probably better be wrapping it up. That's hilarious. Yeah, we've been on it for a little while, so I guess it's a good time to wrap up. If anybody has anything else they want to ask, otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and we will definitely do this again. If you have ideas that you'd like to hear in a future conversation, shoot either one of us a message, and we'll come back on and talk about that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and thank you, Mario, for all your help welcoming everybody and keeping the conversation going over there so we could keep the conversation going over here. This was a lot of fun.
It
Thank you,
was.
Donnie, for making time tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl, for the impetus to get this going and to open up this conversation. And this has been so much fun.
Yes.
This has been a
Yes,
ton of
it
fun.
has. It's just the beginning, I have a feeling. So we'll see where this goes.
Awesome. Awesome.
All right. You
All
take
right.
care.
You too.
And we'll
Bye,
see you guys
everybody.
soon on Facebook. Bye.
And bye bye.